Heaven sent.
Greetings, boys and girls, and word up, players, as we begin our third entry in the crime games of the early 2000s series. So far, we've scratched off a few notable games in the genre of felonious fanfare, but there's still plenty of offerings we've yet to discuss. So this time around, I wanted to make it a point that I lend my ears to the comments section and try to touch on some of the games I had seen being requested the most. And while a couple of these were a completely new experience to me, I can assure you, they definitely fit the bill. So without the need of any further rambling, how about we just dive right in and prepare ourselves for another round of devious gameplay. And with that being said, my friends, I'd like to welcome you all into another bullet-soaked edition of the mini crime games of the early 2000s. The world of crime games have been known to summon a wide variety of strange ideas, and as we've seen from previous entries of this series, sometimes they can be a bit too ambitious.
Only God could judge them.
But in the case of Made Man Confessions of the Family Blood, ambition is something it greatly lacks. Developed by Silverback Studios, a UK company whose first and only game would be the topic of our discussion, it's safe to say a lot went wrong in the process of creating this game. Beginning with the plot, we follow Joey Verola as he recounts his many years in the mob while driving to a meeting in which he will hopefully become a made man. And apart from having the most typical Italian name for any mafia-related character, Joey's had it pretty rough. From serving in the Vietnam War to becoming an enforcer for an organized crime family, Joey is no stranger to cold-blooded murder. And by the end of this game, neither will you. You'll move from one room to another, taking down hordes of enemies, with a range of about 2 to 3 different character models. The enemy AI is either ducked off in the corner aiming at absolutely nothing, to all of a sudden turning into Revolver Ocelot and making all of their shots.
You're pretty good.
And this wouldn't be as much of a problem if it weren't for how poorly the gunplay performs on the player's end. With most long distance enemies being impossible to reach with almost any weapon, and invisible walls being a problem in connecting shots. This game will have you frustrated within just a few moments of playing it. And rather than catering the resources to a variety of characters or maybe tightening the gunplay, it seems as though the bulk of their work went into hat physics. Not bad. And who doesn't love a good helicopter boss fight? Those are always fun, right? Right, guys?
No more.
Anyways, I have a sneaking suspicion that the development team for this game were heavily inspired by the Max Payne series, as there's a lot of elements that are comparable to the first game. The concept of inner dialogue throughout missions, the run and gun style of gameplay, and even the use of a mediocre bullet time mechanic, all making an effort to achieve that magical Max Payne-like experience. But without the ability to properly connect with your targets, or even jump for that matter, it just ends up feeling like a soulless knockoff. While the writing is pretty decent, with the game's narrative being constructed by esteemed author David Fisher, in collaboration with the real-life former mafioso, they did a decent job of weaving a somewhat interesting plot. But if you've seen more than 2 mafia movies in your life, you're most likely not going to find anything creative or unique from this game's storyline. And you'd be a lot better off just spending a few hours with a Scorsese film rather than giving this game a shot. It's got Big Lots bargain bin written all over it, and although I'm sure some of you out there are fuming at my opinion on it, I just gotta keep it real. But on a positive note, the voice actor for Joey, Rick Pasqualone, is also the voice of Vito in Mafia 2, which is a game that's much more worthy of your time. So if you're looking for a unique Mafia-style experience in your gaming agenda, I'd say pass up on this one. But if you're willing to put up with frustrating gameplay and brain-dead AI, well, knock yourself out, kid. But as for our next game, it's an adaptation of one of the most beloved crime films of all time. And for a video game based on a film, it's surprisingly one of the greatest crime games I've ever played. So without further ado, it's time to say hello to my little friend. And Scarface, the world is yours. As we're making our third trip around the block for the topic of crime games, our second title is one that has become highly requested. And after revisiting this classic after about 15 years or so since my last playthrough, it's clear to see why you guys were so adamant on me covering it. Crime-related media is obviously a popular subject in not only gaming, but also in film. With the Al Pacino classic of Scarface being one of the greatest crime films out there, it was only a matter of time until it received its very own gaming adaptation. And on October 10th, 2006, Scarface: The World Is Yours was unleashed on the gritty underbelly of the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Windows PC. Beginning the game's narrative with the iconic mansion shootout that was originally the film's ending, the game's writers decided to spin this narrative in a way that Mr. Montana survived these events and is being forced to rebuild his empire from scratch, meaning it's time to regain control of the drug trade in Miami, take back your turf, and also rebuild the respect of our peers in local law enforcement. And in order to make this happen, nothing talks in the neon-clad streets of Miami like some cold hard cash.
For this hasn't come from selling Girl Scout cookies, man.
You'll find yourself taking on various missions, hitting the streets with your product, as well as a litany of other crimes and minigames to stack up some green. But this never comes easy, and the opposition of rival dealers and street toughs will demand that you use force more often than not. But the game's economy will demand a balance of law and order, if you wish to keep your profits at a maximum, meaning that you're going to want to stay low on the 5-0's radar if you don't want them cutting into your earnings. But if you find yourself in a messy situation, it's nothing a little donation to the boys in blue can't fix. Now that's the game's concept in a dime bag size nutshell, but the level of depth in this game's journey to regaining your empire is actually quite impressive. You can purchase other businesses to help in laundering your funds, intimidate rival gang leaders for control of territory, and further build your empire with a squad of goons. They also give you the option of purchasing exotics, which are cosmetic items that will help rise your reputation in the city. I mean, what better way to spend some f*** you money than by getting a tiger for your mansion? Nice kitty. Anyways, they give you plenty of incentive to raising your status, as well as a reason in building a steady income for yourself. But how does the rest of the game play? Well, my friend, much like the majority of other GTA clones from this era, the expected carjacking, profanity spewing, free roam mechanics are present in this game as well, but it's far from your typical rehash, and in many ways, Scarface may have even inspired some future mechanics for the GTA series. Take for example the targeting system. While GTA had been steadily improving its targeting system throughout its multitude of early 2000s releases, its more refined mechanics and targeting hadn't come to fruition until the release of GTA 4 on April of 2008, in which they gave the player the ability to guide the stick throughout the desired target, meaning you could easily choose which parts of the body you would like to attack. And while this was a major upgrade for the GTA series, this mechanic had already been conceived in Scarface almost 2 years earlier, giving its players an ability to lock onto their target and guide the stick for more damaging shots, making the gunplay have a much needed intensity to it, and even included the use of a rage mechanic, rewarding players for well-placed shots and disrespectful taunts. And not only will this game teach you how to keep your word, but you'll also be brushing up on your Spanish in no time.
Now I'm fucking pissed.
Whereas the realm of open-world crime games can be steeped in mediocrity, Scarface: The World Is Yours is a refreshing take on the genre, combining the strengths of its competitors, the atmospheric charm of a classic film, and even a slew of its very own original ideas, making it to be one of the greatest crime games of its era. It's a beautiful journey into the seedy world of 1970s Miami, and with its lengthy licensed soundtrack, you'll be sure to find yourself kicking back at Club Babylon, having a drink, and maybe even hitting the blackjack table. There's plenty to do in this ambitious film adaptation, and is a pleasant take on what could have happened if Tony Montana were to live on in the film. It's well worth a playthrough if you haven't given it a chance just yet, and it's one of the better movie licensed titles of all time. But enough on that, as we're just getting started on our debauchery driven list of games, and for this next one, you're gonna want to strap in, cause it's sure to be a bumpy ride, in the 2005 console exclusive of 187 Ride or Die. Traveling back into the depths of gaming history, the 1976 arcade title, Crashing Race, was the very first game to introduce the genre of vehicular combat. But with the success of many other IPs such as Road Rash, Spy Hunter, and of course, Twisted Metal, these types of games had quickly become a celebrated genre for players all over the globe. I mean, what better way to make things interesting than by strapping a Gatling gun to your uncle's Firebird and having a high-speed shootout with your local ice cream man? It sounds a bit far-fetched, but these types of games were super popular, especially in the early 2000s. And with the success of crime-based games, as well as vehicular combat, having the gaming industry in a chokehold, our pals at Ubisoft thought it would be a great idea to combine the two, and create a racing title that's about as unhinged as it gets. The name of this game was 187 Ride or Die, and oh boy, is this one a doozy. In 187 Ride or Die, you'll find yourself filling the shoes of a local street thug named Buck, who's been taken under the wing of a South Central crime boss named Dupree. Dupree has found his turf being threatened by a rival gang, headed by a man named Cortez. Cortez and his goons set out to erase Dupree, and after a failed assassination attempt, you're now in charge of reclaiming Dupree's turf and putting a stop to Cortez for good. But in order to do this, you're going to be participating in a slew of illegal street races. But not your typical races. Oh no. In 187 Ride or Die, they want you to win by any means possible. And if that means having a passenger hanging out of your vehicle with an AK-47, so be it, my friend. It's basically a high-speed drive-by simulator, and despite its incredibly cringe dialogue and sometimes repetitive gameplay, 187 is surprisingly a damn good time. The mechanics are pretty simple, with the right triggers being used to shoot either forwards or backwards. The vehicles handle pretty smooth, easily carving sharp turns, quickly accelerating, and even going into autopilot for the times you need to focus on the rear view. With the emphasis of the game's mechanics being on the destruction of your rivals, you're sure to be dishing out plenty of hell yes throughout your playthrough. And while racing is a huge part of the game's story, there's also a decent variety of other game modes, with deathmatch, escort missions, and even a police chase mode being welcome additions. As you progress throughout the game's story, you'll slowly unlock new vehicles and even characters for use in the other game modes, as well as a medal system being used for those who want to get the most out of their campaign progression. But if you want to get into the details of how polished the game really is from a critical standpoint, I can't say it's the most sophisticated of games. As I had mentioned before, the character dialogue is very reminiscent of the stereotypical cheese we found in 25 to Life, with the majority of the characters spewing enough forced slang in every sentence to make them sound like a 12-year-old who's just learned their first curse word.
My gangster rider homie Buck. It's time to lock and load and blaze these streets against Cortez's sucker-ass crew. The deal is, homie, the last rider at the end of each lap swims with the fishes. You feel me?
Sure. The game's main antagonist, who happens to be your boss, is a prime example of this. He's supposed to be this big scary crime boss of South Central, but every time he speaks, I can't help but to giggle at how try-hard it all sounds. Now this isn't a knock to any of the voice actors in game, as they did an amazing job in lending their voices to these roles, but you can tell that the dialogue just had to be written by some out-of-touch intern, making use of Urban Dictionary.
You're freaking whack and don't diss me!
But anyways, back to the gameplay. As I had mentioned before, despite its shortcomings, it's actually a total blast to play this game, and even offers a 2-player mode for those interested in some bullet-soaked couch co-op. With an array of different vehicles, locales, and race types to experience, 187 Ride or Die is a game that is a must-play for any fan of the early 2000s gangsta genre. And I would even go a step further as to say, it's one of the better vehicular combat games I've ever played. It may not be the prettiest or the most innovative, but not everything has to be. The game sets out to create an experience comprised of nothing more than high-speed, action-packed goodness, and in the case of 187 Ride or Die, they achieve just that. So make room on your backlog for this one, as it's a game well worth giving a playthrough. But just remember to adjust your mirrors. You're going to want to keep an eye on what's behind you. Now for the next entry in our story list of menacing titles, this next game is one that's sure to please even the most diehard of 90s gamers. A game that was shunned by retailers before its release, and even further vilified by the media, bringing us to the nostalgic year of 1999 and the Windows PC release of Kingpin, Life of Crime. Kingpin follows the tale of a street tough who's been beaten and left for dead in a fictional reimagining of Skid Row. He's out for the blood of the head honcho responsible in this merciless attack, and will stop at nothing in his quest for revenge. Cut 2, you'll find yourself indulging in a multitude of mischievous activities, mostly violent crimes, and even recruiting other members and building your criminal empire. Now I know what you're thinking, this game looks an awful lot like Quake 2, and that's because it was built using a modified version of the same engine. A lot of the gunplay and overall movement in the game will be familiar to those who are fans of the Quake series, but if you think this is your typical shoot 'em up style FPS of the late 90s, then you've got another thing coming, bucko. What made Kingpin such an ambitious effort for its time was in its sheer size and style. With the game's art design initially being handled by a protege of Sid Mead, a young artist named Viktor Antonov was looking to give the world of Kingpin an incredibly unique aesthetic. Melding together themes of 1930s Art Deco with cyberpunk aesthetics into a realistic urban environment gave the game a gritty yet surreal atmosphere. And with a massive roster of shady characters and enemies to encounter, the world of Kingpin is one that's easy to lose yourself in. And with its emphasis on dystopian hopelessness, it's comparable to the environments of those found in Manhunt's Carcer City. Spooky. But for a game of this style and ambition to be released in the primitive years of PC gaming, the team at Xantrix were doing some pretty big stuff. Not only did the game look amazing for its time, but it also played incredibly fluid, combining the beloved combat of the Quake series into an open world setting, and giving players the opportunity to pay their path of revenge however they see fit. Will you glide through the story Duke Nukem style, solo with guns blazing, or will you recruit other members to form a crew, in order to have some help on your path to destruction? With plenty of interactive characters and dialogue to guide the narrative, first-person shooters with this level of depth were certainly hard to come by, and having a game of the crime genre go into this level of detail was definitely something special for its time. Now I should also mention the fact that Kingpin included two different multiplayer modes, your standard deathmatch as well as a capture the flag inspired mode called Bagman. And for many fans of the series, this is where Kingpin shined the greatest. We all know how much people loved playing Quake online back in the day, with massive conventions and LAN parties being dedicated to it throughout the 90s and early 2000s. So with the previously mentioned Quake influence playing such a heavy role in Kingpin's gunplay, and setting its online matches in urban, dystopian environments, made this a breath of fresh air for those looking for something a bit different. And with the online presence of Kingpin still having a highly active community in present day, it's safe to say that they were doing something right. Now I had opened with the mention of this game's controversy. It was essentially because of the game's timing, with the horrific events at Columbine High School having happened only a couple of months before the game's release. Video games were under heavy fire at that time, and the over-the-top violence and profanity found in Kingpin was definitely something that concerned parents. Because of the bad stigma of its content leaving a poor taste in the mouths of those at corporate America, a lot of interested retailers such as Best Buy had declined in having the game hit their shelves, and Kingpin even had to strap a warning label on their product to further push the fact that this game was only intended for mature audiences. But as we've seen in previous topics of controversy, this only sparked more curiosity in the minds of gamers, and probably helped in boosting the game's success, more than they could have ever imagined. The critical reception of Kingpin was overall positive, with many critics praising its unique design, level of immersion, as well as depth of gameplay. It had a little something for gamers of all walks of life, and brought a unique experience to the realms of PC gaming. All in all, it's rare to find a game of this genre rather than GTA being so innovative. But Kingpin was an important title in the year of '99, and is still highly appreciated by retro enthusiasts in present day. So if you find yourself with a craving for debauchery and need a little blast from the past, Kingpin is well worth its $10 price tag. But for our last and final game for this video, I think we've covered just about every playstyle, except the good old beat 'em up genre. So let's strap on our leather jacket and get our fisticuffs ready for some tussling in the Namco classic of Urban Reign on the PS2. The genre of beat 'em up games is one that has been around since the early 80s, with the 1984 release of Kung Fu Master spreading like wildfire in arcades across Japan and the US. Gamers were just beginning their fascination with the button-mashing action fest that can be found in your typical beat 'em up, and as the years went on and the technology got even more advanced, it was only foreshadowing the immense amount of improvement that we would see for future games of the genre. From the success of Fighting Force on the PS1, the introduction of Tekken Force and Tekken 3, and a personal favorite of mine, Jackie Chan's Stuntmaster, all becoming beloved beat-em-up titles in the late 90s and early 2000s, the genre was beginning to grow in ways that fans were overcome with excitement. Taking the previous 2D worlds of classics such as Streets of Rage and putting these traditions into 3 dimensions, with fleshed out fighters and immersive environments, and in the realms of the PS2, I'm sure the majority of beat-em-up fanatics will give the genre best title to none other than Capcom's God Hand. But just a year prior, a personal favorite of mine was swiftly dropped on Sony's beloved console, with the PS2 release of Urban Reign, and in my opinion, it definitely takes the cake. The game's narrative follows Brad Hawk, a rugged Channing Tatum type whose fists could be considered as deadly weapons, is hired by a beautiful triad by the name of Shun Ying Lee, in hopes that Brad will be able to recover her kidnapped comrade. The problem is, they have no clue who's actually responsible in this kidnapping, which means you'll be fighting your way through a variety of different locales, and taking on every gang that the city has to offer. A task that is both daunting and sure to bring its players a hefty case of carpal tunnel. While button mashing is a tried and true tradition in the realms of beat-em-up games, Urban Reign takes things a step further, adding a variety of grapples and counters to keep the fighting as fluid as possible. You can pick up objects and use them as weapons, sprint off walls and treat your opponent's head like a set of bowling pins, and also perform special attacks. And while your experience with Brad can be pretty forgiving at first, the difficulty will quickly ramp up after gaining a couple of missions under your belt. This is where a lot of people can become frustrated with the game, as it's for sure overwhelmingly difficult at times. But the reward of successfully countering your opponents and taking down an entire squad of goons all by yourself is by far one of the most satisfying feelings you'll find in a game of this genre. And upon completing some of the more difficult missions, you'll see exactly what it is that makes this game so rewarding. The fighting system is designed to sort of adapt to your surroundings, meaning if you're being jumped by 2 or 3 guys, you have the ability to pull off combos that will attack each one of your foes in a different way, which is sure to have you feeling like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse without a doubt. The environments and assets within are mostly dynamic, with many locales such as warehouses and bars having plenty of table smashing goodness to satisfy your appetite for destruction. And while the plot may seem a bit thin for some of you story buffs out there, it's more than enough to make sense of the pure chaos surrounding our character. The game also features an excellent variety of multiplayer modes, and even the option to play through the story in co-op with the use of a cheat code. And these modes weren't something that were just dumped into the game without a thought. They put a great amount of effort into giving each character their own unique movesets, as well as a variety of different tag moves for fights in a duo. You can unlock these characters by completing the missions in-game, or like we had previously mentioned before, just use a cheat code, if you're feeling a little strapped for time that day. But you'd be doing yourself no favors in missing out on this game and its story, especially if you're a fan of beat-em-up titles. It's one that I highly recommend, as it really scratches that itch for early 2000s crime goodness. Plus, it's made by Namco, which should already tell you it's a solid play. Because in the world of crime games, it's rare that we find a title that carries this much charm. But as for the rest of the games we've yet to uncover, I guess we'll just have to see what the future holds. So if there's any games I've yet to cover in this 3-part series, please drop a comment down below, as I'm always open to suggestions. But that's all for now, my friends. I hope you all enjoyed this video half as much as I enjoyed making it. But we've still got a lot of great content on the way, so I hope to see you in the next one. But until next time, stay safe and take care, guys. I look forward to our next journey. Peace out.